Hi, I'm Lawrence LeBrocq, managing partner of Garces, Grabler LeBrocq. Welcome to Victim to Victory, the definitive authority in personal injury. Today, we're lucky enough to be talking about intake, especially with SpeedAI. Their CEO and co-founder, Hayden Haskins, is here. First thing we should just say is Hayden just had a little boy. I think that's your first child, and welcome him aboard. And I was just telling him how, man, don't miss a trick because they change so quickly. Enjoy every stage. How are you today, Hayden?
Doing all right. I'm doing all right. We're finally getting caught up on sleep, so a lot more refreshed than I was about a month and a half ago.
Well, that's good to hear. But those stages will change. Maybe you'll sleep, then all of a sudden things are going to change. He's going to start crying, then he's going to be mobile. So enjoy it. All right, let's talk a little bit about intake and Speed AI. What is Speed AI and why did you start Speed AI?
Yeah, so SpeedAI is an always-on intake AI agent that does not answer the calls. It simply listens to every call that comes in to your firm, qualifies it, grades your agents on how they're doing, grades the case quality on the cases that come in. But the big feature that everyone loves is a feature called Lead Rescue, which will identify a qualified uh, opportunity that called your firm, that already decided that you were the firm that they wanted, called you, and for one reason or another didn't sign up. And it'll flag that to leadership to get that person back on the phone and sign them up. The reason, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was going to say, so how does that actually work?
So, every call that comes into the firm gets pushed into our system. We transcribe it. We do a little bit of sentiment analysis, and then we analyze the call for things like case quality, agent performance, coaching notes, and we analyze that call against your firm's case qualifying criteria and determine if it was a viable case that you should have taken. Um, the reason why I was about to get into the reason why we created this is we saw it time and time again. I've been in legal marketing for about 12 years. I believe when you spoke to my brother, he's been in it about 15, 16 years. We've just seen firm after firm after firm start a marketing campaign. They're getting an influx of leads, and then 3 months down the line, they're going, "Hey, why are we not signing any more cases?" So then we would go and start listening to the calls that had come in. Say, "Hey, did you see this one that came in? Did you see this trucking accident that came in?" And it was like beating our heads into a wall, trying to convince law firm owners to do the right thing by not only their business but by their clients, and in revamping their intake process. So this was a constant struggle to make sure that the people who are calling into a law firm get the help that they need when they need it. I'm very encouraged to see that in the market, so to say, folks are paying a lot closer attention to intake nowadays than they did 3, maybe 5 years ago. So it's very encouraging to see that change.
Well, you often talk about firms losing a big seven-figure case at the very first phone call. What are the most common lead leaks that human intake agents unknowingly commit?
Yeah, there's a few of them, right? But at the core of it is, if you think if you think about your average intake agent, right? They are answering phone calls all day, right? So let's say you got an intake agent at your firm that's answering 25, 30 calls a day. Historically, that person's job has been almost like a gatekeeper to the firm to prevent the firm from having to, do a bunch of work on something that might not be a case, right? So if you think this person is answering the phone and disqualifying callers more than they're qualifying them, right? So eventually they kind of develop it. It's almost like a muscle, right? It's almost like you get muscle memory for certain things. And they tend to hear certain patterns that the person's talking about, certain fact patterns, go, this person's going to have a case. So they kind of quickly move them off the phone. I've heard folks give, misquoting the statute of limitations. That was a big one early on that we had to build into the platform. There was an individual that called a firm that was using the software, and they heard, oh, the accident happened in October, and I don't remember what month it was, but they heard the year wrong. And so they thought that the 2 years had already lapsed and it had already been 2 years, 2 months. But in reality, it had been about a year and 10 months, I think. And so they said, sorry, but you don't have a case. And the person was like, oh, okay, yeah, I was afraid of that, and hung up. The software flagged it and said, hey, this is actually well within the statute of limitations. Give them a call back. But, when you hear that the potential client or the caller, the plaintiff, is a real person with a real problem, right? Called in and said, hey, I was just seeing if there was anything I could do about this. And then, they don't know how intake departments work. They don't know how, a law firm operates. They just know they called a law firm and the law firm said, oh, you don't have a case. Sure. That person had kind of given up, right? So this person who could have, who should have a personal injury attorney, should have representation in this matter, decided, yeah, I guess I'm just going to give up. So lead rescue flagged that lead to the intake director. They called him back, signed him up, and it's a real human thing. Most people just don't know how this whole thing works. We take that knowledge for granted.
Sure. Now, traditional call auditing has been done. Now, that relies on manual random sampling. Why does this old method completely fail personal injury firms when they could be using SpeedAI? What's the difference?
Yeah. We've done manual audits, right? This product came out of an intake coaching program that we had at Grabler Marketing. I was kind of the connector for that service, and my desk was right outside of where the intake coaches would sit, and I would hear them all day playing phone calls, right? And they were sampling 5 phone calls per agent per week. Now, going back to the math of earlier, right? Let's say your agents take on average 20 calls per day, right? And you're sampling 5 calls per week, right? There's 5 work days. That's 100 calls a week. You're sampling 5 of them. That means you have a 95% chance of missing something, sure, right? So, on top of that, you could listen to 5, 10 calls and not really find any coaching opportunities, or worse, you may find something daunting that has been repeated for the last week or month, depending on how often you're doing call audits. It's a massive time suck. There's really not been a way in recent years that firms could audit calls and audit agent performance at scale until we came out.
Right. Now, in past iterations of legal marketing, firms would rely on the Yellow Book, which we now use as door stoppers, or, TVO, SEO. Why is the customer experience now during an intake the new defining battlegrounds between law firms?
Have you watched my past talks or something? Because this is something I talk about a lot.
I do my research.
There was a time when the folks who were dominating traditional advertising were the ones who got all the cases, right? And around 2012, 2013, 2014, you started to see these kind of young, scrappy, hungry attorneys who kind of came from behind, like a dark horse. And all of a sudden, you'd see the old market leaders, and they go, "Why am I seeing this guy's name on the docket so often? Where is he? I don't see him on TV or anything." And they were dominating the internet. Well, now that playing field has been leveled, right? Everybody is marketing on the internet. Everyone is, got some form of traditional advertising. Everyone's running on referrals. In the consumer's mind, personal injury law firms are somewhat commoditized, right? It's an uncomfortable truth, but it is what it is. The only differentiator at that point is how you treat somebody when they call your law firm. We're seeing more and more firms pay attention to that. Companies like, Case Status, that's their whole deal, is how they're treated through the life of the case. We just happen to be, optimizing for that first call experience.
Now, talking about that first call experience, you review 100% of the intake calls coming in. How does the platform flag the details in real time and get that information to leadership without overwhelming everybody?
So when we onboard a law firm, we walk through all of their qualifying criteria. within their intake department. So we'll go case type by case type. Is this a want? Is this a refer this case out? Is this a decline? And then within those case types, we'll say, hey, what are the must-have qualifiers? What are the absolute disqualifiers for this case type? And so we'll refine how our system treats each of those case types. So what that leads us to is, the system will automatically determine if a case is qualified and only alert leadership to a case that is a wanted case type, wanted fact pattern, and was not retained. So we try to cut down on the amount of lead rescue notifications that a firm gets, simply because, if you're overwhelmed, I mean, in the early days, it was, some firms were like, I'm just getting so many. So we realized we had to cut down. So you don't want to lose the signal and the noise. So
Right.
with some of our more recent updates, we've just seen incredible performance for some of the firms using it. They're like, it's insane how accurate it is to our intake procedures and the types of cases that we want.
Now, this is lead rescue, and you told us about one of the cases where, candidly, that was probably malpractice by telling somebody the wrong statute of limitations, because they would have lost the opportunity to file that suit. So you saved one law firm from a malpractice suit. Tell us some of the other cases that you've saved, some of the big ones, and how the law firm react when you gave them that good news.
Yeah. So first, I want to point out that, I kind of want to say that, but I also don't like. I usually avoid saying that it's potential malpractice because I don't want to be seen as like fear mongering. But you're absolutely right. But some of the examples of some wins. Actually, Wilmar talked about one. He did testimonial for us recently. Big shout out to Wilmar. He's actually the first person to ever get a 100 on a call.
Wow.
He talked about a truck accident case that had called y'all, and for one reason or another, there was like a misunderstanding with the person being able to speak to reach someone who spoke Spanish, and they ultimately just dropped off the call, and lead rescue alerted him to that call, and he called him back and retained it. There's been some incredible wins. You can see some of them. Some of the folks like the testimonials on our website. I try not to like divulge, certain wins, but I'll tell you a story about the first lead that was ever rescued, and this was before I had been kicking around the idea of this concept of lead rescue for about a year and a half. And end of 2024, I had built like the shells of what would eventually become SpeedAI, and we had someone at the office. We were showing them how it works, and I was like, look, here's a new row in the spreadsheet, and watch, it's gonna go, and it's gonna do an analysis. It's gonna come back. It's gonna see we're gonna see how they performed. We're gonna see how good the case this was, and the rest of the caller ID fills in, the call fills in, and then I'm like, watch, it'll be about 10-15 seconds, and the rest of the grades will fill in, and we see the grades fill in, and it's a B or an A rated case, and the person answering the phone got like a 40 or a 50. And I was like, oh, it's a good case. They performed poorly. Let's just listen to it. And it was a gentleman who had called a law firm. His 18-month-old son had crawled out onto the balcony of an apartment complex that he was living at. And there was a missing baluster. And his son crawled out, went through the missing baluster, and fell a whole floor. He was following the ambulance to the hospital. He knew that the apartment complex had someone on the way to the hospital. He knew that there was fire, there was EMS. He was dealing with all those people and looking at the prospect of, I know that this guy from the apartment complex, he said I've told them multiple times to come and fix this, and they did it. He knows that they're going to go and try and say, hey, this actually wasn't our fault. It was actually your fault, or, try to blame him, try to blame everything. But the fact that they're railing their safety feature at their apartment, was in disrepair, and they ignored the requests to repair it. But he obviously wasn't going to be the most pleasant person in the world at that point, right? He's in an emergency. He called the firm, and he was saying, "Hey, can you help me with this?" And the intake representative, she was harping on, "Hey, we need pictures. Do you have pictures of the railing?" And he's like, "I'm in the ambulance right now, or I'm following the ambulance right now. I can't give you pictures, but the apartment people have pictures, the EMS, the fire people, they have pictures. But I can't give you pictures right now." And she's like, "Well, the attorney's going to want to see pictures before we decide to sign this." He's like, "Well, if you can't help me, then I'll call someone else who can." Hangs up the phone. She actually put him on hold for a couple minutes, and then he hung up the phone. And we immediately just dropped everything. We were like, "Hey, get him on the phone, have him send her supervisor to the hospital to meet this guy, and just apologize up one side and down the other. Say, hey, sorry, we dropped the ball here." And he ended up signing up with the firm. The child had it had an orbital fracture and had a minor brain bleed. The child's going to be okay. But that ended up being, it hasn't settled out yet. It hasn't, that case hasn't wrapped up. But it'll be mid to high six figures for a lead that he would have never thought twice about. Right. And I say that because, I've heard you talk about it on this podcast before. These are real people with real problems, and they see you as the solution. Right. You better have every tool available to you to make sure that if there's something you can do to help that person, you better be ready to do it.
Right. Well, it's funny you say that because I just received a call last night. I was having dinner with, now we don't do tax law, but we have a tax lawyer that works with our firm. And I'm out to dinner with him, his partner, and one associate, and a couple other people with our firm. I get a call from a woman I know who just suffered a dog bite. I get up, I took her away from the table, and I could have just told her, "Hey, look, I'm in the middle of dinner, let me call you back." Because it's a friend of my son's mother. But I didn't. I says, "Well, what happened? How can I help you?" And she tells me that she's bit by a dog, and she's a dog walker. So I'm like, how bad can it be? I'm thinking. But she's talking to me, and really, she likes to talk. And I'm like, all right, I really want to go eat dinner, but I have to show some empathy. And, so I talk to her. Then she sends me a picture of a chunk taken out of her chin, and half of her chin is gone. And I was like, oh my God. Now that was a situation where I could have said, "Oh, let me call you back. I'm really having dinner. Let me run." But of course I didn't. And thank goodness, because that's the kind of thing that can just blow a huge case. So let's talk about that and the empathy, how important empathy is. And if there's a lack of empathy, how do you coach that through your system and train the human agent that's answering the phone to be more empathetic to a client? How does that work?
Yeah. So it's hard to codify it, right? There's no formula for how to show empathy to another human being, right? It's kind of like what you did there, right? She's telling you about how bad this dog bite is, right? And you might want to get back to dinner, right? But if you didn't just take the time to hear this person out and really understand their situation, then you wouldn't have known, hey, this is a severe dog bite, right, with very likely permanent disfigurement. So, there's a lot of things that our system will recommend folks do, to just, saying, I'm sorry that this has happened to you. You did the right thing by calling us. This is the type of work we do. We help people like you every single day. There's, reassurance that kind of falls under the empathy. It falls into the empathy bucket. But our system will spot when someone says, "Hey, my son was, injured or was, injured at daycare," and the person goes, "Oh, how do you spell your name?" There's a difference between the human to human connection that should be happening on these calls, and how some firms treat it where you call in and it sounds like you're talking to a form, where they're just trying to get those form fields filled out. And unfortunately, it happens in this business, right? Firms that just kind of want to only take the cases that they really really want, and kind of just disregard the rest. So to answer your question, how do we coach for empathy? It's kind of something you can't teach for, right? It's kind of something you either have or you don't. So yeah, there's not a great formula on how to show empathy. It's something that is an innate human quality.
And it's amazing that sometimes you can become jaded in this business because you see so much tragedy, and it could harden you or callous you. But it's amazing. Even a guy like, I've been doing it almost 40 years, I still have empathy when I see these people, how they're really hurt, and yet how it affects their lives. You can never tell a jury because it breaks the golden rule. Put yourself in that person's position. But I always do as a lawyer. How is this person feeling? And that's something that these the intake agents really need to remember. This is a human being, and even though you're getting 100 calls a week at least, you have to still show that empathy. So it is something that's tough to coach. You're right. It's innate in a human being. So talk about now, if we have law firm owners watching this, how much money are you saving law firms, on average? Talk about that. Because, of course, all these damn law firms want to know how much. What's my return on investment? How much am I going to make?
So this is actually a number I have our VP of Customer Success report to the entire team in our Monday morning meeting. So some weeks it's, some weeks we're rescuing, 2.5 million in case value. Other weeks it might be like one. Some weeks it might be like 750. But extrapolated over all of our customers, the average SpeedAI client rescues about $400,000 in fees, or $1.2 million in total case value in a year. So to date, we've rescued over $150 million in total case value. That is something that, if it all went kaput tomorrow, I would hope that they would etch that on my gravestone. Because, aside from making, a bunch of law firms, $50 million cumulatively, there's $100 million out there that went into plaintiffs' pockets.
I'm glad you said that.
They could not have, right? If they didn't have a second pair of ears on their intake call.
And that's what I love to hear. It's really, I try to tell everybody, it's not about the law firm. It's not about the money. The law firm's going to do fine. It's about that individual that you're saving. You're saving their case. You're saving a lot of money, putting a lot of money into people's pocket that really could use it when they're going through such a horrible tragedy in their life. So I think what you're doing is wonderful. Talk about the languages. How many languages can you do this in?
Oh, I mean, if someone calls in and they, first they're speaking Russian, and then they switch to Spanish, and then they switch to Tagalog, and then they switch to Mandarin, the system will be able to understand it. I think we're at 162 languages last I checked.
Hell, I didn't know there were that many languages on Earth.
Oh, you'd be surprised.
So if somebody is listening and wants to hire SpeedAI, tell them what are the 3 reasons you definitely need us, and then tell us how do they find you.
What I would say to a lawyer, if they were asking me if they should use SpeedAI, would say, do you care about the people that call you? Do you care about the people that work for you? And do you care about your bottom line, right? And if you care about those 3 things, you should at least give it a try, right? The average firm that runs a free 2-week trial, again, it's 100% free. There's no pay first, and then if you don't like it, we refund. We'll just let you try it for free. The average firm that tries it for 2 weeks for free rescues 1 to 2 cases in that time period. Our hope is that as a firm owner, as a business owner, you look at that and go, okay, this tool's paid for itself, and this is something we're comfortable doing. But if you're a law firm owner and you're watching this and you want to try SpeedAI out, you can go to speed.ai. That's the domain, speed.ai. And there's a button that says try it free for 14 days. Click that. If you're watching this on a Tuesday, we could have you live by Wednesday afternoon.
No, thank you so much for being here. I'm amazed at the 168 languages. As soon as we're done, I'm going to go to Grok or Chat GPT to find out how many languages are spoke on this planet, because I'm very curious now. But Hayden, thank you so much for being on the show. It's always a pleasure to see you. Congratulations with the baby boy.
Absolutely.
Enjoy it, my friend.